Hey everybody, you can see once again I got the Captain Dork cam on, which means it's time for their tool demo. And what I want to do today is I want to go over the angle grinder. Now, you guys are lucky because at this point I've actually done this presentation 3 different times, and each time I've done it, the thing has frozen up on me. So I really hope it doesn't freeze on me today, and I'm hoping this will actually work. Now, before I start talking about the angle grinder itself, I do want to start talking about PPEs first. And you can see here that there are a number of PPEs you do want to wear regarding the angle grinder. The first one you want to wear is obviously your safety glasses. This thing produces a lot of sparks. This thing makes a giant mess everywhere. And the last thing you want to do is send sparks all over the place and have any of that get in your eye. A lot of you have heard my horror story on the wire cup and safety glasses. This is what caused that. Someone was using this without safety glasses and they got a wire in their eyes. So make sure you have safety glasses on at all time. Second thing is, this thing produces a lot of noise. This is probably one of the louder tools that we have in the shop. So you want to make sure you have hearing protection. And you can see I'm wearing earplugs, and these are what's called filtered earplugs, which means that I can hear people talk through these, but it blocks out all the high-pitched noises that are caused by the machine. Okay. The third protection you want to wear with this is actually these guys. You want to wear hand protection when operating an angle grinder. The reason being is because, one, you're not sure what that thing's going to kick up and spray all over. And the last thing you want to have happen is all those metal shards getting all over the back sides of your hands. Now, ideally, that you'll have the angle grinder set up to where it's not spraying sparks all over your hands, but accidents do happen. And I can tell you guys from personal experience, having caught an angle grinder on my hand before, that you'll definitely want to have it set up to where this thing is not going to be spraying sparks or getting caught on your hand in any way. On the note of PPEs, you do want to set this thing up appropriately if you're left-handed or right-handed. Right now, this machine is set up for a right-handed person. The reason I say that is because after I get it uncoiled here, you'll notice that this has what's called a paddle switch on it. A paddle switch is the on-off switch that is controlled by a large paddle on the bottom of the grinder here. This is a double lock paddle switch. You have a single lock here that you have to pull the trigger. If you pull it without pushing that lock in, it won't move. So you'll pull the first lock, and then you pull the second lock, and this depresses it and allows you to operate the angle grinder. This one in particular does not have a locking switch on the side because I don't like having those in class, because if there's a chance someone can leave this plug or leave the switch on and then go to plug it in, then someone can have this thing be someone can have the machine on and plug it in, and it'll jump to life on them and they won't even know it. So I like having the paddle switch grinders because they're a lot safer in our situation here. Regarding left hand and right hand, right now this machine's set up for a right-handed operation. I'll put my right hand on the trigger, left hand on the hold handle. Okay. If you're left-handed, you'll actually want to switch the hold handle over to the right side like this. The downside to having it switch over to this side is you will also have to change over the spark guard. You will have to turn this guard so that it protects both hands while operating. You can see here right now, this hand is wide open from sparks and deflections from this angle here. But when I put this handle switch, or when I put the handle over to the other side, now both hands are protected by the guard right here. You can see here that the guard is angled in a way to where it will actually protect both your hands. So make sure it is in a way where you can protect both your hands. The other thing I want you guys to be aware of when you're operating this machine, this thing produces a lot of sparks, okay? And the last thing you want to have happen is somebody standing right next to you, you're grinding away on this thing, and you're showering the person behind you with sparks. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself in a way to where you're not covering the entire shop with metal shavings, and you're not covering the person behind you with hot molten metal shavings, because if you're showering the person behind you, if you hold this thing in a way to where it's covering someone else's metal shavings, I can pretty much guarantee you they're not going to be real happy to be covered in hot metal shavings coming fresh off the grinder. All right. Now, when it comes to using the grinder, there's 4 different setups that we're going to be using in here. The first one is what's called a wire cup. This is used for removing paint, removing finishes, removing rust, giving yourself a nice clean material to be welded on. This does not remove metal. Well, it removes a very minimal amount of metal. You will get a slight, very little bit of metal removal, but this is not designed for removing any large amounts or any amounts of metal. This is meant for removing finishes, surface material, mill scale, to make sure you have a nice smooth surface to weld on. To remove this, you will hold the lock button on top of the grinder and you'll turn the wheel until it locks, like that. You will continue to hold the button in the lock position and you will turn the wire cup counterclockwise until it loosens, and then you can remove it. The beauty of most wire cups is they have a built-in arbor. You can see the arbor right here. The arbor then threads onto the spindle, onto the angle grinder, and there's no requirement for a secondary locking roller. If you're really lucky, you can get the next wheel, which is what's called a flap disc. Okay, the reason it's called a flap disc is because if you look really close, you can see all these little flaps of sandpaper that go all the way around it. This one has a built-in arbor as well. This thing simply spins onto the angle grinder and it self-tightens. You can see we spin it on like that and it's on. You don't need to tighten this with any wrenches or anything, and the reason being is because during the operation, this thing actually tightens on its own. This wheel is meant for smoothing and polishing. So if you have any like rough corners or any sharp edges, or if you have like really thick rust that you need to remove, you will want to use this. This will remove metal, okay? It does not remove metal at near the rate of a grinding stone, but this will remove metal. So you need to understand that when you're using this wheel in particular, this is meant to remove metal, not in a fast fashion because it's meant for smoothing and polishing and making things look really nice, but it will remove metal, okay? If you want to remove large amounts of metal, do not use this. And the reason why is because these wheels are expensive. These wheels cost between $5 and $10 a piece. And if you use this to remove large amounts of material, that's a lot of money going down the drain just to replace this thing constantly because you're using it for the wrong purpose. If you need to remove large amounts of material, once again, hold the button in place, remove your flap disc, and you will then insert what's called a grinding stone. A grinding stone is a very thick disc, okay, and it's meant for surface grinding. So when you put this thing on, it is meant for grinding on the face of the disc. You can grind on the edge here if you want to cut things, but it was not designed for that because it's a very thick disc. To attach this thing, you'll notice this requires a two-piece arbor. You have your backing arbor, your backing lock nut arbor, but you also have the locking nut arbor on itself. And I want to pay special attention to this thing because I want you to see that this arbor is not the same on both sides. You'll notice on one side you have a shoulder, on the other side you don't. And the reason that's important is because when you look at your wheels, certain wheels have different thicknesses. You can see this one has a different thickness than this one. And this wheel in particular will require that this shoulder faces to the inside. So when I'm going to put this on the grinder, I'll put my wheel on like that. I'll take the shoulder side and put the shoulder to the inside of the grinding stone like that. So I'll tighten this by hand, okay, lock it in place. This thing is good to go. You will use a grinding stone like this when you have to remove a lot of material. So if you know you've really screwed up on a weld and you have to remove the entire weld, use the grinding stone. It will remove a lot of material in a quick fashion. If you use anything else, it will take longer and it will consume the disc and it will be more expensive. Use this when you have to remove weld, when you have to grind a weld down, remove a weld, or anything like that. Now, like I said, this thing can be used for cutting, but it's not ideal for cutting situations. If you need to use a wheel for cutting, remove your grinding stone, and you'll actually use what's called a cutoff wheel. This is also what's known as a skinny wheel because you notice it's very thin. Now, the reason why it's thin is because this is meant for cutting only. You do not grind on the face of this thing. If you grind on the face of this thing, what can happen is the whole wheel can literally explode. And there's actually photos out there on the internet about guys who've had the cutting wheel explode on them. And one guy actually has a shard of a cutting wheel lodged into his safety glasses because the wheel exploded on him. So make sure when you use this thing, this is for cutting only, and you are to only cut on the edge. Do not cut on the face, do not grind on the face, but you only cut with the edge of it. To attach the grinding wheel, once again, we'll put it on our grinder, but you'll notice here, it is not a very thick wheel. So when we insert our locking arbor, we want to attach it with the flat face, not the shouldered face, but with the flat face down. If we try to attach it with the shoulder facing down, you'll notice that when we tighten it up with the shoulder, get it down there, the wheel just sits and spins freely. Okay, that's not good. It means we're not actually attached. So we have to take our arbor off, make sure that the wheel is actually centered here to make sure it's not offset or any weird stuff like that. We'll attach the locking arbor like that, and then we'll just simply tighten it down so it's snug. Now we're ready to cut. Now, before we ever plug this thing in, we always want to make sure any changes or adjustments are made with it unplugged, because even though this has a safety switch on it, we don't want to run the chance of this thing getting pulled where you're trying to switch the grinding disc on it. Now, when it comes time to actually attach our work pieces, so let's say we want to cut on this guy. We'll want to cut the corner off. So we'll set this thing up like this, and we'll want to make sure we always use something to hold our work pieces down. So in this case, I'm going to use this clamp, holds it in place really firmly. You can see here it's not going to move around. Now I'm ready to cut. Now I do want to set this thing up a little bit differently so I can spread my sparks in the direction. Plan your work so that way if you are cutting, we can see here that when I cut this thing, I'm going to cut like this. These wheels spin one directional, okay? They're going to spin counterclockwise. So when you're cutting with this thing, sparks are going to spray that direction. You can see over here, there's nothing behind me except, well, some sets of electronics, which I don't plan on cutting into. But you can see here that when I cut with this thing, there's nobody that's going to be behind me. And I'm not going to spray my computers over there either. So to do this, I'm going to plug my cord in. All right. And then if I want to make my cut, so if my finger was not covered, then it would have hot sparks. So the next thing I want to show you guys is the grinding stone. Unplug my grinder. Okay, I'm going to loosen the cutting wheel. To change over to the grinding stone. Okay, does not have to be tight. Okay, and like I said, this is meant for removing large amounts of material. Flap wheel. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to attach the flap wheel. Flap disc. This does have its own arbor on it, so I do not need to use the locking collar. Plug this in. Okay. Screw this out. Okay, give it a nice smooth finish, kind of rounds off the corner there. Okay. The last thing I want to show you guys is the wire cut. We'll take off the flap disc. Attach my wire cup. If I can. There we go. Plug this back in. And we can see here if I have rust or anything that I want to remove. Okay, to a nice polished surface. All right. So those are the 4 cutting wheels that we'll be using in here. There are a whole ton of other grinder attachments that you can actually get for these things, but those are the four main ones that we'll actually be using in here. Hopefully you got a good look at that. The last thing I want to show you guys is how to wind up a cord on a grinder. Now, the last thing I want to do is put this away where someone's going to yank it out and they're going to have the cord going all over the place. So here is how you wind the cord up on a grinder. Take the cord, go around the front of the grinder, bring it around the base, and then you will wind it around the barrel of the grinder like this. Doesn't have to be that tight, just make sure it's nice and snug. And we'll bring the cord back through the loop at the end. And that is how you wind up a cord on the grinder, so that way it doesn't stick out or get all over the place. All right, make sure you put your discs away when you're done. Don't leave anything out. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed it.